from scratch. No idea. I haven't planned anything, and we'll see where it goes. Okay, so we're in the MPC 1 Plus here. I'm running the latest version of the operating system, which is called MPC 3 Beta. Now, this is relatively stable, but I will be making some cautious steps along the way. The reason why I'm using this is because it has workflow improvements that are far superior to the previous ones, certainly for the way that I work. Now, just some terminology to get over at the beginning. See sequences at the top here. In a way, that's like a scene in Ableton Live. Scenes have collection of clips, right? So these patterns that exist underneath as such are the same kind of concept. So you can choose to have the clip powered by a drum kit or a plugin or whatever. So we'll see some of that now. So I'm going to basically get something up and running. I'm going to build a drum kit. We go to browse, we select a pad, and then we choose a drum sample we want to load. There are some drum kits here that are available for you. But this is not the kind of vibe that I want to go for. And by the way, it does have a pattern there, so you can listen to the samples in context. These are from their factory library. I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm going to go to Places. I've got my samples loaded up on a USB key. I'm going to go into Sample Library, and I'm going to use... Inside the drum hits folder, I've got a collection called Triads. This is from Wave Alchemy, and I think this is a really great collection of drum samples to use. And I didn't want to use my own sample libraries because they're from all over the place, so you can never replicate these. But if you wanted to replicate what I'm doing, you can go in, buy this library, and then use the same samples. So kick electronic, I'm going to go into deep. I'm going to audition some of these. I don't want to spend forever doing this because it's going to be a boring demonstration. We'll try and find two kicks. One is going to be quite punchy, and then one is kind of be lower in pitch in a way, kind of a bit more flabby, I think, as a contrast. Actually, I'm going to put that in. I do like that. The other thing I'm going to do is go to full level here, so I don't have to worry about velocity. So that's how hard I'm pushing the pad. Now I want to contrast. Maybe this for the second one. I like that. So deliberate contrasts between the two. As I said, one punchy, one kind of deeper. And so there is a contrast in energy. I like what's going on with those. I'm also now going to pick a couple of other elements. I'm going to get maybe a couple of claps here. So let me just go into that library again. Let's come up a level. Let's go to claps. Let's go to deep. You can't really go wrong with a 909, can you? But it's which one? I'm going to go with that one. And then once again, a contrast. Let me find something shorter, maybe higher in pitch. I like that. It's kind of flabbier. There's more kind of like kind of transients in a way. There's you've got a clap. You've got lots of people clapping at the same time. They don't do it precisely at the same time. You get a nice kind of shape to the waveform. And in fact, we can see that. There you go. Look at the comparison between the two. This one's kind of flabbier and wider, but I quite like that. Now, traditionally, we tend to kind of put a closed hat and an open hat here. I'm going to go for the same kind of principle. Let's go to browse. Let's come up. Where are we? I've gone too far up the list here. So let's go to closed hats. Let's take a look. What do we get? Categories. Let's go to vintage. Okay, I quite like the very small amount of reverb on that. Yeah, I like that. So let's now look for an open hat. And yeah, as I said, really, I'm trying to go for speed here so that it's not a boring demonstration, but I am making quick decisions in my mind as to what I'm selecting. We can use the rotary control here as well. Different pitches. I quite like this one. It's quite tight and short. Yep, that's good. Nice elements already. Maybe a couple of snares. Let's go up. Where we go? Let's have a look. What do we got in terms of choices? Snare, acoustic, electronic. Let's take a look at this. I go for bright. Oh, I like that. Let me load that there. Let's get another. I'm going for a couple of relatively short snare hits here. That's great. That's almost like a rim shot. Nice. Okay. The other thing I think I'll go for at the moment is to get some percussion, like a shaker. Let's come up. We've got a shaker section. In fact, there is a vintage in here. Maybe this, yeah, I think I'll go for that. But in fact, I really like the sound of that tambourine. Okay, let's get something down. Let's, we're going to do record and play, and then I'm going to essentially play some elements in and build up a sequence. So contrasting elements at the moment. Okay, let's get that in. Now notice I was playing in swung, whereas it's locking it into a straight 16th grid. You can see that up here, time correction. I'm going to say here that actually I want everything, sorry, all events swung. So we'll do this here, right? So this is going to be like a global timing correct. You can see that it's on. So everything that I do from now on will be according to this. So that's nice. I prefer that vibe. So what I've just done there, and I'll just show you on this arrangement here, I've got the snares are kind of alternating, almost like call and response. Those two there. So look, those two are working kind of in opposite. They're on the same position in the grid, but they're doing kind of like, you know, call and response between those different parts of the bar. So loving this tambourine to double up on the open hat. And when we want to add something, we use overdub. Okay, so here we go. So the other thing that I didn't include was this shaker. I'm going to have a play around with this. Now the other thing I'm going to do is just do a quick mix down here. And when you're doing this on the fly and quickly building stuff up, you know, sometimes a bit of housekeeping could be useful, but I'm probably going to do all of that when we go through to Ableton Live. So really what I can do now is I can use this pan and volume to solo things and work out what's what. Or also I can trigger here. So you can see that this one here, let me come to this and bring this down a bit. So we're just adjusting levels. Gonna bring this clap down. Okay, so there's a nice little vibe on the grow here. So what I would do next is I would get something new. So instead of loading up drum samples on here, I'm going to load up some kind of musical elements. So I'm going to search for chord. Let me get the spelling correct. The one thing I will say about this screen is that the response is not always as immediate, say, for example, as an iPhone or iPad. Sometimes you do have to press and go slowly. I tend to kind of speed around stuff, so it can maybe be a bit too slow for me sometimes, so I do have to slow myself down. Okay, so I like the sound of that chord. So I feel like I need something to complement that. So if we go over here to the next one. Okay, I'm just going to do this for speed. Okay, I've loaded the same thing. There we go. Now, notice there's an overlap. Now, generally you would go through and change the envelope so that they're not overlapping. I'm just going to show you something. On this sample, if I double tap the screen, we get a new screen here where we can make some changes. We go to global. It's on one shot. So we're talking about the envelope, but I'm happy for that to be one shot because sometimes it's quite nice. It's got this kind of almost like a hip hop kind of vibe to it. I like having this, but what I want to do is make it so that they can't overlap each other. So I'm going to put them into a mute group. You see over here, so off, I'm going to put that to number 1. This over here to number 1. So watch. So only one can play at once. And so that brings this kind of separation. I think that's going to be really useful on this idea. So that's working nicely, but I want to bring something new in. Let's have a look. So once again, browse. And this is from, as I said, it's the factory library here. Okay, here. I'm going to put them all into the same group actually. So once again, so this over here, go to global, mute group 1. Now maybe this would be better with some kind of shift. So there we go. Now that's a vibe, you know, so I'm just going to mute this. Now this is where I personally start to get excited about stuff because all of a sudden I've come across something that I really do feel has connected with me somehow. And sometimes this is a lucky process, you know, literally, as I said, I'm doing this off the top of my kind of head really, searching through the factory library, which is something I don't do all the time, I really don't. Generally I've got my own collections of samples that I use, but this is proving very, very interesting. And already what starts to happen for me is I start to hear bass lines in my head. So this is a really great point at which to say, okay, let's get a new element. Because remember, we're building up some ideas, some parts, I guess, that we can then bring through into Ableton Live and arrange into a track idea. But you can see we're getting these things together at speed, and it's with energy and excitement about trying to push through. The biggest problem, I think, for a lot of people is the fact that they don't get anywhere and then they get disheartened and then they stop. So for me, the key is always keep pushing the energy forward. Using products like this, I do believe, can really help with getting that energy continually. So we got some keys. Now, as I said, I'm starting to feel a sense of a bass line. So I'm going to bring on a plugin this time. We've got the Mini D, which is a Mini Moog emulation. It's great. It's just something you have to purchase, but they always do these like deals every now and again. We can get it for a really good price. It's a really nice Mini Moog emulation. What I want to do here is just open up, I can slide here and go to sounds. And in fact, in the library, there is a bass patch, Mini Wood, which is something that I've used a few times. It's a really nice patch. I need to bring the notes down, take this down an octave or two. And also go on to chromatic, actually, I forgot about that. Let's have a listen. Something like that, I think. So what I'm doing there is I'm just doing some adjustment of levels. You could see that. We can go into the arrangement here and see the notes that I've played. I'm feeling I like how they're working. Let me just have a listen again. Now I might take this note over here and take the end and just extend that out, because that's what's going on here. So I'm trying to get kind of like echoing the same kind of almost like lengths and distribution of these notes. I find that that can really help. And maybe these can come out more. But I don't know about you, I'm hearing a little bit of a problem in that I feel that the kick, the second kick that I added earlier, is clashing now with this bass. And it's these notes here. So what I could do is I could take these out, see how that feels. Sometimes, as I said, it doesn't respond quite as I'd like it to. There we go. Now there, what that's doing is allowing for that second kick to be there. But I've had to compromise by taking a bass note out. So if I go undo twice, let's go and take a listen to see how that would feel by making a change to the second kick. Now for me, taking that out at the point when the bass comes in, I think is a good move. So what I would probably say is, let's keep this. Let me get it back to where it was. So I think it was here. I'm going to keep this. I'm going to export all of the audio so I can make a choice on the arrangement as to when that's going to be used. So I would actually probably say it's going to be great on the intro before the bass line comes in, but then when the bass line comes in, I will actually take that out. Or what I could do is allow for that to coexist, but have some means of kind of frequency dependent ducking. Track Space is a very good plugin for that. So what I could do is I could say, when the bass line is playing, now cut a nice little chop in the EQ frequency range where that kick is, where the bass line is out of that kick. And then that means that the two can sit together. You still get that energy of that extra kick. So these are all things to consider. Okay, let me listen to this again. So what I'm thinking is, I tend to start thinking, what else would I need in that arrangement? If I'm not going to need to go and add that within Ableton Live, what else might I need? So let's go back onto the first drum kit. I think at some point I'm going to need a ride cymbal. So I'm going to bring this up. Let's get a space and browse, and let's get a, let's come back out to that library again. So places, as I said to you, I've got in here, let's take away the chords. I'm going to go to sample library. Drum hits. I'm going to go to triads chord again. This time I need to find a ride cymbal. So these will be here somewhere. I'm just going to try and find. I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll do a search here. Ride, because I think there's going to be a place for that. And I don't want anything kind of accurate, these acoustic ones. So I think I want to go for something a bit different. Let's try. Now that's a real kind of classic 909 style ride. I think that's going to suit. Okay, let me find that. By the way, I mentioned cautious things to do when working with the MPC 3 beta. I did save the project. I did that off camera. So this is automatically saving in the background. And so that means we shouldn't have any issues because I've saved and now it's auto saving. So let's find the ride. Just experimenting with different patterns there. I think ultimately in the composition that would be thinned out and it would be a bit more kind of distant. At the moment it's quite prominent, but I'm going to record that on the offbeats. So once again, overdub, and let's get that going. So we're starting to build up the idea. Like I said, it's forming quickly. That's the whole thing here about getting that motivation to keep pushing forward, getting stuff down. And I have many nights where I just sit at this box, I knock out ideas. It doesn't mean then that in the evening that I'm going to go and turn those into a structure. It means I put them in my little library of ideas. I can come back to them at any point in time. And you guys might have noticed this when you're composing, sometimes you don't want to arrange. So you're keeping those kind of energy levels in check, getting the vibe of composing, getting that all done, getting some space maybe, and then coming back to do the arrangements. So I've got loads of sketches that I've built up. And this, for me, is a great way to get those ideas together that I want to arrange on another time, because in a way, they're separate mindsets and separate skills. One thing I feel I'm missing at the moment is maybe some vocals. So I'm going to set up another drum track. I'm going to go to browse here. I'm going to come back to the content, the factory library as such. Okay, so I'm going to search here now for vocal. Maybe it's Vox or VOC, I have no idea. I'm going to play this whilst listening. That's good. Great. Interesting. Now, just by pure fluke, some of those are really in key. But what I'm going to do once again is I'm going to take all of these, I'm going to go onto global, I'm going to put them all into the same mute group. 1, 2. So that's in a way that kind of Todd Edwards style thing, the chops, is without you having to get in there and do much work. Put them all into the same mute group. And that's the same as a choke group inside Ableton Live, right? Okay, so there are definitely some little kind of sketchy vocal kind of triggers there. Maybe it's worth taking a look just at a plugin, some kind of instrument, maybe something to complement those chords. I'm wondering about some kind of synth brass thing. Let's have a look. Let's just increase the pitch. So that's actually really quiet. I'm going to go into the instruments, bring this up. So we've got these. Okay, it's really quiet at the moment, but I could hear what was going on there. Let's get in there and do some balancing. So. Just experimenting, seeing whether any additional notes might benefit coming on here. So maybe, but let me bring those keys back. So we go on here. Where are we? So let's have a listen. On the wrong one. No, too much of a clash. I think I'm going to add this. And you could see earlier what I was doing was I was taking some of these elements out. Just trying to see how they might feel. One more thing that I think we could do with here is some kind of tension synthesizer. So if I go to plugin, we'll go for the Selena string, a classic. Let's have a listen. They're real kind of clash and classic kind of tension string. Something like that I think is better. Kind of high. So right at the moment, yeah, these are kind of ideas, okay? I'm going to record that in. So I think this is a good place to stop, and the reason is because I think I've got my core ingredients. I think I can flesh this out in Ableton Live, and this is a great kind of like core idea. I think we can get a lot of mileage out of this. I haven't really worried about how it sounds from a mix perspective. That's something we can move on to, but I will say, if you only had this, there is scope for doing mixing within here with the plugins that you have available. There's some very, very good I'll show you here that if you go to EQ, there are a whole load of EQs. There are dynamics plugins, you know, compression, reverb, delay, everything. And there's one thing that I do want to show you actually, something that I really do like about this is if we go back to those drums, let's solo the drums. Let me show you something here. I really like this. It's called Flavor. It's called Flavor Pro. Let me show you this. This is something, another one that you have to buy, but I love how you can dial in these kind of classic old school samplers and also some other things like VHS tape. The SP1200, the EMU, the classic kind of hip hop drum machine. So there's all these kind of textures that you can add. I'm not going to include that here, but when you do have the plugin on the MPC one, when you have it on the actual hardware, you also get the license for putting it on the DAW as well. You know, so you've got that flexibility for later. So I'm not going to suggest we export these, but sorry, I'm not going to suggest we export with the effects, but we are going to export these now, right? So I've got a USB, so I've got a USB key in the background. We're going to now take all of these elements. Now, the drums at the moment are on a kind of drum bus. So all of those individual kicks, snares, and hats, and so on are all going to come out on one stereo output. I don't want that. So what are we going to do is we're going to go click on this pen and we're going to do explode track. So any of those where we have multiple samples on different drum pads, exploding the track takes them out onto their own individual tracks. And then that means when we export the audio, we're going to get discrete individual tracks instead of them being summed together. So let's go past all of these. You can see the numbers going up. We've got individual outputs for these individual pads. This is another one with 3 samples on it. Let's go over here. Let's go to explode track. Let's come over now to the next set. We've got some more here. these vocals. Let's click on the pen. Let's go to explode track. And then we're going to be in a position where we have everything that we need on separate outputs to now be taken out as audio. So we go to browse. I'm just going to double tap on that button to save the project. Like I said, it's kind of like a cautious thing that I'm doing here. Now what we'll do is we'll wait for that to finish. We're going to click on the menu and we can say here save, and we're going to go all tracks. This is going to render these out as audio into a folder on the USB key. I'm going to stick an audio tail on the end because sometimes there may be a decay of an effect or something that we might want to keep. And we can chop that off, of course, into Ableton Live. So I'm going to do this now. If we do have changes we've made in levels and so on, then yes, you might want to include these. You might want to turn off the effects as well. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to export these. I'm going to choose a folder. So on my internal USB key, I have an audio exports folder. I'm going to do a new one here. I'm going to put Danny MPC track idea demo, and then I'm going to call here track idea demo. And essentially we're done with the core idea here. It's saving these out now as individual audio tracks. We will bring these through into Ableton Live, and then we can take a look at how we're feeling about it, maybe start doing some basic arrangement, but then also considering what do we need to add to make this a finished track. It could be some additional elements, and it could be any of those plugins that we have access to within Ableton Live. It could be others. For example, I mentioned before the Native Instruments Complete bundle. I have all of that, so I have lots of choices if I wanted to add those. So that's the first step in this kind of hybrid approach. We're done with the hardware now.